I-20 or DS 2019 application through FoxLink. All of you should have access, and I think I even issued I-20s for all of you. But you should be in FoxLink and have completed the financial certification form, and then submitted a copy of your passport biographical page and a copy of your supporting bank documentation, like financial aid letters, bank letters, or bank statements. Once you submit all of those documents to us, and I review them and ensure that they comply with our requirements, I will then go and issue the I-20 or the DS 2019. So if you're on the F1 status, you're going to get a Form I-20. If you're a J1, you're going to get a DS 2019. And I will mail that out to you. And then once you have that document in hand, you'll be able to pay your SEVIS fee, the SEVIS I-901 fee. We have the link there for you, but it's very easy. You're just going to click on that link. You put in some information from your I-20, you submit your credit card information, and then you'll be able to pay it. Most important thing, though, to remember with the SEVIS fee, please make sure you keep a copy of your confirmation of payment. You're going to need that for your student visa interview, but additionally in the future, you may need it anyway. So it's really important that you retain that with all of your other documents that you use for immigration purposes. And then once you pay the SEVIS fee, then you'll be able to move into the next step, which is making an appointment with the U.S. Embassy or Consulate. The first part of doing that is completing the form DS-160. And that's all online. You'll be able to find that link through your local embassy's website. And then one little note too about emergency visa appointments, since some students may have that, most of the embassies are prioritizing students to get their visa appointments. And so if you find that you can't get a date, particularly before the start of the summer or the fall session, you can submit a request to get an emergency visa appointment. And typically they will honor that. In some cases they may not, but it's important that you at least try to make that request and hopefully be able to get the appointment before the start of the fall semester. Jennifer, you can go ahead to the next one. All right. So once you get your I-20 or DS 2019 from me in the mail, you have to make sure that you go and sign that I-20 on the front page or the first page of it. And then once you also get your visa, you're going to upload copies of those through FoxLink. Please let us know too if you have any issues at all getting your visa. If you can't get the appointment or if they're canceling your appointments or something like that, it's really important for us to know that so that we can kind of keep up to date on who to expect and try to provide additional assistance if possible. All right, now to Jennifer.
All right, thanks, Megan. So that was a real quick overview. We know that sometimes the process can seem certainly more lengthy and overwhelming than what we highlighted, but those are the key steps that you'll need to take. And then when you get to Rollins, so Keegan made a point to indicate in the chat that as a Bermudian, she doesn't need a visa, right? So a visa is just a document that you need to enter the US. But if you're coming into the US with either an I-20 or DS 2019 and a student visa or even without one, if you are from Canada or Bermuda, you will have an immigration status. And as most of you noted, you'll have F1 or J1. Your immigration responsibilities, and again, this is just a real basic overview, but you need to kind of think about and be aware of this before you come. You will need to register and complete full-time coursework every fall and every spring semester. Summer is optional unless you were starting your program in the summer, which none of you are. So I believe most of you joining us are in an undergraduate degree program. So for you, full-time will be 12 credits. So most of you will also likely be over 12 on average in the College of Liberal Arts in order to complete in 4 years, you need to average about 17.5 credits per semester. And so typically our students take 16 to 18 credits per term. But just keep in mind the minimum is 12. And only one course during each semester that is online or fully online could be counted toward this full-time requirement. And as you know, Rollins is going to be resuming fully in-person classes, so it's highly unlikely that you would have any online coursework. But in the event that you found yourself with one, just keep in mind you're only allowed one that would be counted toward the full-time credits. You also will have some limitations regarding your ability to work in the US. So again, those of you on a student visa, these limitations apply to you. You will be eligible for on-campus employment. So for those with F1 status, you will be eligible as soon as you arrive on campus. You can, look for employment on campus. In fact, you should be keeping your eyes open during the summer to receive an email from our student employment office, because that is when the positions that will be available for the fall will be posted. So if on-campus employment is of interest to you, make sure you're checking your email regularly, in particular in July, and apply early. You will also eventually be eligible for approved internships. And so we'll go into much more detail during orientation about what that involves, and also the process to get those internships off campus approved. But you're not eligible until you've been in the US for at least 1 year, one academic year. So for most of you, you wouldn't be eligible until next summer. And then once you're graduating, you would also be eligible for 1 year of full-time work authorization. All of these employment options we will cover at orientation, and we also regularly have employment workshops. So I encourage all of you to join those workshops early, even if you're not yet thinking about post-graduation employment, because the more you start to learn about the immigration processes and sometimes challenges, the better position you're going to be in for when you graduate. The other thing that you need to keep in mind to maintain your immigration status is that you need to keep your immigration documents valid. So as Megan mentioned, she's issuing each of you either a Form I-20 or a DS-2019. So those you need to make sure remain valid as long as you are a student. And so all of them, when you get them, make sure you check, and you'll note on the form that it will indicate an expected program end date. Your passport, of course, has an expiration date, as will your visa. So keeping in mind what is the expiration date of those documents is important, because you would need to keep them valid. If you are working in the US, or if you receive a scholarship that covers more than your tuition, then you may have a taxable event. And so you will need to make sure you follow the tax reporting obligations that are part of your immigration status. And in fact, all of you, regardless of whether or not you have employment or a taxable scholarship on which you need to pay tax, you all will need to file at least one form every year. And so we'll cover that information every spring. We'll send out guidance on the forms. We'll also give you resources to use to prepare those forms through a third-party provider that you would use online to prepare your documents and submit those. So just keep in mind, though, that when you see something related to taxes, in fact, it might apply and likely will apply to you. All right, so the other thing we want to talk about is health insurance. Most of you probably have already seen your student account for the fall, and in most, hopefully all of your cases, you have seen a health insurance charge. So why is it that we require health insurance of our international students and students who permanently live outside of the US? So the policy is that any student registered for fall in those categories will automatically be enrolled in an annual policy. And the reason is because of the high cost of healthcare in the United States. You've probably heard in the news about our healthcare system. It is predominantly privatized. And so in order to offset the cost, we require you to have health insurance. And most people in the US that have health insurance have it through employment. And so we're providing it to you through your student status. It will give you access to healthcare, both from a standpoint of your physical health and your mental health. It also will cover prescription medication. So we're going to talk a little bit about the healthcare system. So Rollins, as you may know, has a wellness center, and the wellness center is comprised of both our health services and counseling and psychological services. And all of the services provided by the Wellness Center are free of charge to students. So of course, this is going to be your best option. It's the most convenient, especially for those of you living on campus. And they can also prescribe. So if they prescribe a medication to you, that would be an additional charge, and then your insurance would offset the charge that you would pay to the pharmacy for the medication. But more information and specific services that they provide are on their website. But you also meet members of the Wellness Center at orientation, and we're going to go into a lot more detail. There will be a whole 45-minute session on insurance as well as the healthcare system, but this is just to highlight a few key aspects. As I mentioned, the system is privatized, so many people will use a private doctor, which will be your next least expensive form of care, rather than going to either an urgent care walk-in clinic or hospital. In the United States, the hospital is the most expensive form of care, and so we encourage students to go first to a private doctor, well, certainly the wellness center, and then a private doctor. And then if you don't have one, emergent care will still be quite affordable compared to the hospital. The insurance policy that you have all been enrolled in is issued through Wellfleet Insurance, and it's for 1 full year. So it goes into effect August 15th and will end next August 14th. And then, of course, the new year policy would start the following day. As I stated, the premium has already been charged to your student account. If you have a comparable insurance policy of your own from home, and again, I say if it's comparable, so your policy would need to cover nearly the same amount of coverage and benefits that our policy provides, but you could request a waiver. So I sent all of you an email earlier this month with information on the waiver and the waiver forms. This website you can use that's on the screen to go in and access that information, both about the policy and the alternate insurance waiver form. So make sure though when you go in that you select whether you're on an F1 or J1, or if you're a US citizen from abroad. The premium that will be charged for the 1 year is $1,589. And someone also asks if there are medical clinics, doctors nearby Winter Park that are recommended. The Wellness Center, in fact, will provide a list of recommended, or at least a list of nearby doctors, most of whom they have worked with regularly. We are also just a couple of miles from a hospital and then a number of different walk-in clinics as well. All right. So this is what I was mentioning, that when you go to this website, you're going to want to choose the correct plan. This is an image from last year, but now this year you will see both our current school year and this coming fall school year. So again, be sure to look at the correct program, though the policy hasn't changed from last year, nor has the premium. So Wellfleet, as I mentioned, is the insurance company, and the underwriter or the network that you'll be using is a preferred provider network, and that is through Cigna. So when in US, when you have an insurance plan, most cases you have a network of doctors who have agreed to accept that insurance. And then there is also a cost sharing. So with insurance, it doesn't mean that all of your costs are fully covered. It just means that you have a negotiated rate for each service. And for some people, you'll have to pay a deductible. Again, we're going to go into details of this during orientation, so I don't want to give you too much information that might not seem relevant at this time, but know that there is cost sharing between paying a deductible, a copay, which for example might be $25 to visit a doctor, whereas without insurance, that doctor's visit might be $100. And these are just examples. I don't know, I'm not quoting the exact copays. And then after you have been to a doctor and they have submitted the invoice or the bill to the insurance company, the insurance company will provide you what we call an EOB, or an explanation of benefits. And that's where you can see specifically what the doctor charged, how much the insurance covered, and then what is your expected contribution, how much the doctor should be asking you to pay. And it's important to always track those and make sure that the doctor has appropriately charged you so that you don't overpay. My office, and particularly myself, I'm the one that oversees this policy, and I'm happy to work with you if you need to use it. So please, just remember that we'll cover this in more detail, and you can certainly ask questions. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Megan and talk a little bit about cultural adjustment.
Yeah, so I thought maybe we could start out again. If you had any experience where you have traveled for more than just like, a 1 week family vacation or something like that to another country outside of where you typically permanently reside. If you could put a 2 in the chat, that would be helpful. And this could be like if you did I'm sorry, not undergraduate, high school abroad or something like that, or an exchange program. Looks like maybe just one. So, okay, here's a couple more. All right. So those of you who have done something like that have probably already gone through this cultural adjustment process. If you haven't, though, I think it's important that we talk about it because it is an experience. You will have to go through this process. Like you will go through these ups and downs that you see modeled on the screen there. And I thought it's important to kind of go over them so you kind of know what to expect as you make your transition to Rollins in the fall. So, well, the first stage that we talk about is called the honeymoon stage. That's when usually like, the first week or so that you're here in the US. Typically, you are very excited. You're getting to meet new people. You're, at college. This is brand new experience. Maybe it's the first time you're on your own, which sounds great because you get to be away from parents and kind of do what you want. And so a lot of times, like there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of you know, uh, positive feelings about the experience. And so typically you will go and have a pretty high level of excitement and happiness and comfort, I would say, with the experience. But then, after that couple of weeks, the novelty of the situation tends to wear off. Now, classes are in full swing. You might be a little stressed out about like going through and having different assignments and papers. Um, Maybe now it has been a little bit longer. Maybe it's been a month that you haven't seen your family. So a little bit of homesickness might start to kick in. And as a result of that, we call the stage two then the hostility stage, which is a stage where you feel a bit of frustration and maybe even anger about being here in the host culture or host country, in this case, the United States. And so maybe if English is not your native language, you might resent having to speak in English all the time and might prefer to speak in your native language. Like I said, you might have some more negative emotions like feeling homesick or having some anxiety or just feeling like a little depressed. These are all very normal for this stage, okay? But then usually what happens is you move in, if you continue through your experience, you'll come to the third stage, which is the humor stage. And this is where you start to understand a little bit better some of the differences between your host culture as well as your home culture. And you start to see maybe things that bothered you during the hostility stage and kind of caused you anger or frustration. You start to kind of maybe see some of the humor behind it, and you understand why maybe people reacted in particular ways when you did something, or used a certain phrase that uh, is not traditionally used here in the US, or something like that. But you're able to start understanding a little bit better the host culture, and you know feeling more comforted and more at ease with it. And then stage four is the home stage. That's typically when you return now to your home country. And basically, you will be excited about going home, of course, because you get to go see family and return to, what you perceive as like um, your comfort zone. But oftentimes you will also start to have a little frustration on the return home too, because you've got used to the host culture, in this case the United States. You've gotten used to what you see here. You might see some things that you're like, wow, this is really great, or experience some things that like you think are really great, that now you start to compare the two, and you might see some things that happen in your home culture that you don't appreciate as much anymore, and vice versa. And so, it's kind of another readjustment period. And so basically what we're just trying to highlight though is a cultural adjustment is not like a linear experience. It's not like you start out low and end loving the host culture or vice versa. It's a lot of ups and downs through the process. And depending on your particular personality and experiences and stuff like that, you may go through these stages really quickly, or it may take a little bit longer. But I think it's important to just know that this is completely normal. Absolutely everyone will go through this process in some way and experience that. And then I think equally important is to know that there are others around to go and help. And so, Jennifer, if you don't mind switching to the next slide. There are lots of resources available to you to help you kind of navigate that process. And I think it's, maybe initially it's focusing on more personally, like, what can you kind of do to help maintain your health? Basic things for mental health wellness, you know what I mean? Like getting outside, exercising, eating well, getting enough sleep. But if those things aren't helpful, or you still feel like you're really struggling, there are lots of other resources available through campus that you can definitely utilize. And you can see those all there. In the Wellness Center, obviously, we have a counseling center, and they are fantastic. They are, I think, putting together groups too. That's a new thing that they kind of started this year, was a lot more like group therapy. And so I think that this year they're going to continue that. And so they would put together a group for new students who may be experiencing some culture shock. You can come to our office and talk about it. While both of us have studied abroad, so we both have gone through that process ourselves, even though we're both Americans, here in the US. But we do understand that process, and we can help also offer other resources available to you. There's the CC, the Center for Inclusion and Campus Involvement, and seeking out other student groups, affinity groups that may fit you. Like we have the Black Student Union, we have the Asian Student Association, DESE, which is Indian students, and we have a number of others, for different groups. We also have the Office of Student and Family Care. We have on-campus employment if you're just looking to get additional resources and feel more connected to the greater community here at Rollins, because that can be really important too, just building those connections so you don't feel quite as alone. And then also faculty. We have lots of faculty who are international, who are from abroad, or who have traveled significantly. Or if you just want additional help in understanding what you're going through, sometimes that can, and understanding the context of what's happening in the US, that can be really helpful to utilize faculty as well, and use their office hours where you have the chance to talk with them. And again, also to build those connections with others here on campus. So just again, highlight most importantly that it is everyone goes through this in some way. Everyone goes through it at some point during the experience. And regardless of what you do experience, realize it's temporary, that you will be able to get through it, and that there are lots of other people around who are ready and willing and able to help.
Thank you, Megan. So we would love to open it up for any questions that you have. You can see our website is listed here, as well as Megan's and my email address. And then I also, as I mentioned at the start, I'm going to stop sharing because we'd love for you to turn your cameras on, so that we could get to know you. But while you're doing that, I'd love to have anyone or everyone put in the chat where you're joining us from. I forgot to do it when we started. So as a way of introducing yourselves, perhaps now that we're moving into a chance to see each other, if you could put into the chat where you are. Brazil, Peru, Puerto Rico, awesome. Zambia, 2 from Zambia, that's so great. 2 from Peru. Great, well, if you didn't already know each other, perhaps now you can already see that you have someone coming from the same country. Lee has a question, or I think this is Keegan. Actually, Keegan has a question about when do you need the I-20 submitted? So it's not, you don't submit it, you submit the documentation for us to issue it. And so you should be doing that now if you haven't yet had your I-20 issued to you. Once you submit the documents that Megan referenced, the financial certification form, bank documents, copy of your passport, through FoxLink, then we will issue you an I-20 and mail it to you via courier. So if you have specific questions about the forms that you need to upload in FoxLink, certainly feel free to reach out to me or Megan. Megan is the person responsible for reviewing all of those documents and then actually issuing the I-20. But please, if you can log into your FoxLink, there's an international student checklist there where you can see all of the documents that you need to submit. Now, also keep in mind if your funding is not in your own name. So if perhaps a parent is sponsoring you, they'll also need to sign a sponsor affidavit of support, and all of that, again, that's in FoxLink in the checklist. Thanks for that question.
And actually, I will add on just a little thing here. I was also thinking, Keegan, I've already issued your I-20, so you don't have to resubmit any of those other documents. I think maybe what you were thinking of, where we request a copy of the I-20 to be uploaded, that we want you to do it basically like as soon as you get it, you just sign it because you have to sign it anyway. And then if you can upload it into FoxLink, that would be perfect. But
That would help
definitely,
us.
yeah, definitely though, we would have to have it, by the time you arrive on campus, but the earlier the better.
Thank you. What other questions? And is anyone else willing to take their or put their video on so we can see you? So Keegan's not alone here. What happens if you're not able to get the visa on time? Well, that's something you would need to talk with us about to let us know what kind of time frame or delay you're facing, so that we can advise you what your options are. So as I mentioned earlier, and all of you know that we're resuming in-person classes. So due to that, we can't have students join virtually you know, your full semester of classes. So if you can't get here in time for the semester to start, we have like one alternative that we can offer besides having you defer to another semester. So you'll just want to be in touch with us to let us know what kind of time frame you're looking at. Thanks for putting your cameras on, Alondra. And do you go by Julia or Julia? Oops, you were cut off. Sorry, say it again. Uh, I don't know why we can't hear you, but give me a thumbs up if it's Julia. No, it's Julia. I don't know. Yes, okay. Thank you. All right. We had another question here. Okay, so we will not be mandating the vaccine. So we are asking students, if you have access to it, to definitely get the vaccine, making sure that if possible, that is a WHO or World Health Organization approved vaccine. If you don't have access to a vaccine, we will have those available to you upon arriving, so that you can get one right away. The decision on whether or not, if you are not vaccinated, or even if you are, if you might have to do any sort of quarantine, is still being decided. And once we have that decision, we'll communicate that with you. And then, you know, if you don't know already, there is a place for you to report that you have received the vaccine, and in fact, upload a copy of your vaccine card so that we can start to really track. Well, we've already started tracking, but that as new students join our community, we have a better sense of what percentage of our community is fully vaccinated, because that's going to help the college to make a determination of what kinds of activities will be permitted during this academic year. At this time, as far as COVID protocols, you may know that all of last year masks were required indoors and outdoors. We now currently only require a mask indoors, and so that's really, you know, a great move. And then for fully vaccinated people in our community, if everyone is fully vaccinated, small groups are able to be in a you know, indoor space together without a mask. I think that the plan, as far as I understand it, is that for the classrooms last year, for those who were in person, there was 6 feet of distancing between desks. And based on CDC guidelines, that will be 3 feet of distance. And so you can expect there will still be some distancing required in the classrooms. What other questions? What are you most excited about? We talked a lot about some regulatory and maybe not so exciting topics of immigration and insurance. But we also talked about cultural adjustment. Maybe there's some aspects of that that you're looking forward to, or maybe that you're anxious about. If you put those in the chat, that would be great. So others can see maybe they have some shared excitement or concerns as you have. Looking forward to swimming. All right, Keegan, are you going to be on the swimming team? Yeah, awesome. Well, you're coming to a great place to do swimming. Anyone else?
Got a question.
Yes, please.
My question is on the weather. How's the weather
The
that
weather
side?
in Florida, it's really interesting. It can, oh, go ahead. You're cutting out. We can't fully hear you. Do you want to put that in the chat? I know you were asking about weather, but I missed the second half of the question. Or maybe ask it without the video. Maybe the video was part of the challenge. And Alondra says she's excited for new experiences. That's great. Yeah, go ahead, Chimunya. The weather during fall. So the weather during fall
I'm going to ask
will.
what kind of clothes we need to carry.
Oh yeah,
Okay, let
good.
me just
So we recommend that you plan for layers because as the fall semester progresses, it will get cooler at night. When you first arrive, it's going to be very hot, but in Florida, we use a lot of air conditioning, which you will find can be quite cold inside. So many of our students end up wearing layers or some sort of sweatshirt inside, and then take it off when they go outside because it's quite hot outside. So I would recommend that you bring a variety of clothing options that really depending on where you're coming from, right, and what you're used to. For people from northern climates, they do not think that Florida's winters are cold. But if you're coming from a warmer climate or the Caribbean, you might find that it can get cool here in the winter, especially at night. So I would say plan for not the Arctic, right? You won't need real heavy jackets, but you're going to want some layers like a sweatshirt and, long pants. As far as dorms, they do all have AC, yes. And you have limited control over the temperature in your space. We actually are joined by the head of residential life. I'm not sure, Juan, if you want to share what that range of temperature they have flexibility to adjust on. Yeah.
Absolutely. Welcome, everybody. So good to spend some time with you guys tonight. Yes, so we have, and this is all decisions that are made to ensure that the air quality is safe and that our residence halls remain mold free, and so based on the humidity, right? So the typical range is somewhere in between 71 to 75 degrees. I'm not sure if we need to translate that to Celsius in some countries, but so that's about the temperature that you can expect to be able to keep your room in. And about the weather, I love Florida weather. I'm from Colombia, but I do get cold. So I'm from a warmer climate, but I definitely get chilly. So make sure you pack at least a couple jackets. And can't wait to see you guys in the fall.
Thanks, Juan. And because, as Juan mentioned, it's a very humid climate, that the winters, I feel like, what feels cool to me at 65, 65 where I grew up in Pennsylvania would feel really comfortable. But because of the humidity, it feels much cooler. So you'll get to adjust to it, but definitely plan for layers. That would be my best advice. What other questions from a practical standpoint to adjustment or even immigration questions? Yeah, the food. That's a good thing to look forward to. We have I think our dining services are on campus are amazing. We have a quite a range of variety. We have a sushi bar. We have a pub which has, really interesting menu of fish and chips to nice salads, and then of course the full dining hall. The menu rotates daily. There's usually always, though, sandwiches that can be made. There's pizza daily. There's a salad bar. We have a few cafes on campus that have different options. There's, smoothie, one that focuses on smoothies, and then others that focus on kind of a Tex-Mex style salad or rice bowls. If you know the fast food chain in the US called Chipotle, it's styled like that. So that's an option. So yeah, and then of course your walking distance to Winter Park that has a lot of great restaurants, and your dining dollars allow you to use some of that money at off-campus restaurants, which is a real great benefit. Food and weather. You are set. Pretty good weather and great food. What other questions? A little bit more on the hostility stage, yeah. I mean, Megan, I'll let you, if you want to elaborate, I can offer my 2 cents as well.
Sure. So, I think back to like my time when I studied abroad in Spain. I found that like the hostility stage is when you start to get very frustrated with like why, you know, I think a lot of times international students come to the US and Americans are very friendly. Like we're very easy to talk to. You can just walk up to anybody probably pretty much and start, have a conversation with them, or we will approach you and like have conversations. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're friends, and like that's a really common thing that I see with international students. They take that as a sign of friendship and think like, oh, we're close now. And that's not really what that means though. So it's kind of an inverse relationship to what most international students experience in their home countries. And so, that can be a source of frustration where they're like, "Ugh, Americans, like they're so superficial, or, that would be an example of like the hostility stage. Sorry,
The-
my daughter.
I was going to add one about like food, right? So we mentioned all the great food, but eventually our pizza and our sandwiches and our salads are going to be like boring for you. And you might just get really annoyed by our food and crave food from home. So that stage of just feeling like I don't want it. I'm so tired of this food. Why do they eat like this? Their food is so bland. If you're, especially if you come from somewhere where it's spicier, um, that alone, like it might seem so hostility. I mean, that's just one, scientists or sociologists use of the word, but it could be more frustration and annoyance or just like homesickness. Some people call it the homesickness stage. And so don't think of it necessarily like you're going to feel hostile. You might just feel like, oh my God, I just want, a really good empanada, and the empanadas here are terrible. No, they're not. I think they're good, but they might not be like home, right? They're not going to be like your mom's. And so that would be when we'd say to you, try to find, if possible, a restaurant that makes some, of your culture's food so that you can provide that resource or that comfort that you're missing, because that alone can just be like all that you need, right? So for some it might just present itself through food. The weather can as well, right? Like you might just say, oh my gosh, it's too cold, I'm not going outside. And or even the use of AC. I mean, it might be also from a standpoint of you know, thinking of it from an environmental perspective, you might say, why do Floridians keep their AC so high? It seems so wasteful from an energy standpoint. And that alone, that could trigger, you know, you to be in a homesickness or hostility stage. So Keegan asks, how many international students are there this year? Well, in a typical fall, we will have a total of about 280 to 290. And things are looking positive with students' access to visas, but you know, the access to the vaccine isn't, you know, globally as accessible that maybe, you know, people feel comfortable yet. So we don't know where our new international numbers will fall. And so I'm staying hopeful that we're going to get back to the 280 something. Last fall we had 255. And those are students on student visas. We also have a number of US citizens who've been raised outside of the US, and that number ranges from like 50 to 70, in addition to the 280 to 290. And then, of course, we have lots of naturalized citizens or permanent residents. So it's a lot more diverse than those numbers themselves indicate. What other question? Those are good. That's a good question. So how many of you know when International Student Orientation or when it starts? And if you do, will you put the start date in the chat? This is your first quiz, your first college quiz. So while you are finding out the start of orientation, I'm going to answer Chimunya's question on, you guys have the right answer. Yes, August 16th. Special programs for international students to showcase their cultures. There are. So every fall we celebrate International Education Week. But even before that, during orientation, you are going to have, before you even get into a classroom, you're going to make your first presentation to the Rollins community through what we call the Global Classroom Project. So you all get a leg up on the rest of your classmates. You have 2 months to start planning your presentation so that when you get here, you can just enjoy orientation and you don't have to think too hard about it. But you're going to present to a host department on campus about your country and culture. Now, typically, you don't want to spend too much time on it over the summer because your orientation group will come up with a theme. You might do even like a trivia style presentation. You might decide to present only on food. So, you know, yes, I was joking about doing it over the summer, but it will at least, you know, you have the chance to know that it's going to be asked of you during orientation, and to, you know, even think about, well, if I am asked to present just generally, what would I want to share with the Rollins community about my country and culture? So there will be more opportunities than that. We have, as Megan mentioned, a number of student organizations that are focused on different identity groups that you might want to join. And yeah, we hope that you'll get involved as an international peer advisor. You will all have an international peer advisor when you arrive, but then in future years, you might also help welcome the new international students. And that's also another great way to share your country and culture with the new students that you would be helping to welcome to campus. Any other questions? I am going to put my email again in case you, I can't imagine that you don't have it. My guess is that you do, but it's in the chat and Megan can put hers. Know that and Juan, if you want to put yours. So Juan is the person that you can reach out to with questions around housing, and he's a great resource. he was here for moral support. He was here tonight to make sure we didn't have any technical issues, which we really do appreciate your help on. We welcome all of you already. You are very much a part of the Rollins community already, and we can't wait to have you physically on campus so we can meet you face to face, and then continue to reach out over the summer if you have more questions as you start to prepare. All right, well, thank you. And thank you, Megan and Juan, and have a good evening, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Nice seeing you all.